Most people have never even heard of Svalbard, the frozen island in the Arctic Ocean that looks like it belongs to nobody. But here's the twist. Norway controls every inch of it, at least on paper. Because today, Russia's flying in helicopters without permission. China is eyeing it for research outposts. And even countries like India, North Korea, and Turkey are circling thanks to a bizarre 100-year-old treaty that keeps the doors wide open. It's one of the few places on Earth where a country has sovereignty but not full control. And that's exactly what's turning this icy island into a global hotspot. In this video, I'll show you why Svalbard is far more important than it looks, how Russia and China are using legal loopholes to get in, and what Norway is doing or not doing to hold on. And trust me, by the end, you'll understand why this remote Arctic island could become the center of the next big geopolitical struggle. Let me take you to the top of the world, literally. Svalbard is a remote Arctic archipelago halfway between mainland Norway and the North Pole. It's made up of icy mountains, glaciers, and fjords, and not much else. On the surface, it looks like a frozen wasteland, but don't let that fool you. This place is one of the most geopolitically significant pieces of land on Earth. Technically, Svalbard is part of Norway. It's under Norwegian sovereignty, it flies the Norwegian flag, and it uses the Norwegian krone. But here's the weird part. Norway doesn't fully control who can come in or even what they can do here. That's because of a strange and unique agreement signed over 100 years ago. Back in 1920, after World War I, over 40 countries came together to sign what's now called the Svalbard Treaty. It gave Norway ownership of the islands, but with a huge catch. Any country that signed the treaty can access Svalbard freely, live there, do business, even mine resources, all without visas or heavy taxes. Yeah, sounds like a legal loophole made in heaven. And it gets even crazier. The treaty says Svalbard must stay demilitarized, which means Norway isn't allowed to build military bases or restrict foreign movement the way most countries would on their own territory. So while Norway owns Svalbard, it kind of doesn't. And now, in a world racing for control of the Arctic, that loophole has become a golden opportunity for powers like Russia, China, and beyond to quietly slip in and stake their claims. Now, on paper, Norway is the boss of Svalbard. It's their territory, their laws apply, and they even run the main town, Longyearbyen. But in reality, Norway's grip is a lot weaker than it looks. For starters, you don't need a visa to enter Svalbard, not if you are from a country that signed the 1920 treaty. In fact, even citizens of countries like North Korea or Iran, which have zero ties with Norway, can legally settle in Svalbard. That's how open it is. And thanks to that same treaty, Norway can't militarize the island. No navy bases, no fighter jets, no armed border patrols. So if another country plays by the legal rules but pushes the boundaries, there is not much Norway can do about it without breaking its own obligations. Take Russia for example. They've had a pressure in Svalbard for decades. In the coal mining town of Barentsburg, Russia basically runs its own little world. They use the Russian ruble, have Russian schools, Russian flags, Russian signs, all within Norwegian territory. And this isn't just cultural. There have been moments where Russia has tested Norway's patience. They have flown in helicopters without getting proper clearance. They have hosted official delegations with no coordination. They've even ignored conservation rules and built structures in protected areas. So yes, Norway is the official sovereign here, but when foreign powers move in under the radar, take advantage of loopholes and act without consequences, it begs the question, is Svalbard really under Norwegian control, or is it slowly slipping away? Russia isn't just present in Svalbard, it's playing a long strategic game. One that walks the line between cooperation and confrontation without technically breaking the rules. Let's start with the helicopters. In recent years, Russian state officials and scientists have flown helicopters in and out of Barentsburg, often without notifying Norwegian authorities. That may sound like a minor violation, but in a place where airspace is sensitive and military activity is banned, it raises serious red flags. Then there is the issue of construction in protected zones. Despite Norway's strict environmental rules, Russian crews have reportedly built structures, including satellite antennas and support buildings, in areas designated for conservation. Norway protested, but again, the treaty makes enforcement tricky, especially when Russia claims it's for scientific or civilian use. But the boldest move yet might be Russia's latest plan, building a joint research center with China in Pyramiden. A ghost town Russia once abandoned, now they are reviving it, not just with Russian scientists but with Chinese collaboration. It's a quiet but powerful signal. We are not just staying, we're expanding, and we are not doing it alone. All of this falls under what military analysts call gray zone tactics. It's not direct aggression, it's not technically illegal, but it keeps pushing boundaries and slowly shifting the balance of power, all while Norway watches with limited tools to respond. Zoom out, and it fits Russia's wider Arctic strategy, securing control of shipping lanes, extracting resources, and countering NATO's influence in the high north. Svalbard may be small and frozen, but to Moscow, it's a chess piece, and every quiet move they make is part of a much bigger Arctic endgame. From 2023 to 2025, Norway holds the chairmanship of the Arctic Council, the most important international forum for cooperation in the Arctic. It sounds like a big win, right? A chance for Norway to lead the conversation on climate change, scientific research, and sustainable development in the region. But here's the problem: the Arctic Council is broken. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, Arctic diplomacy practically froze. The other member states, the US, Canada, Denmark, Iceland, Sweden, Finland, and Norway, all suspended cooperation with Russia, which was then the Council chair. And yet, Russia still controls about half the Arctic coastline. So when Norway took over in 2023, it inherited a leadership role without a functioning forum. It's like being made captain of a ship that's already sinking. Norway has tried to revive the council by focusing on safer topics like ocean research and sustainable development, things that sound politically neutral. But without Russia at the table, the Arctic Council has lost much of its muscle, especially at a time when tensions are rising and new players are entering the game. Because here's what's really wild: non-Arctic countries are now lining up to join the Arctic conversation. India has launched an official Arctic strategy with an eye on research and trade. Turkey has been vocal about its interest in Arctic affairs. Even North Korea has used the Svalbard Treaty to argue it has legal right to access the region. And China, though not mentioned much in council meetings, has called itself a near-Arctic state and is investing heavily in Arctic infrastructure and science. So why is everyone suddenly obsessed with the Arctic? One word: opportunity. As climate change melts the ice, new shipping lanes are opening up, cutting travel times between Asia and Europe by up to 40%. That's a game changer for global trade. At the same time, the Arctic is believed to hold 13% of the world's undiscovered oil and 30% of its natural gas. That's billions, maybe trillions of dollars in potential energy. Plus, there is fishing, rare earth minerals, scientific data, and military positioning, all in a region that until recently was too frozen to matter. Norway now finds itself in a difficult spot. It wants to promote peace, protect the environment, and uphold international law. But it also has to defend its interests, especially in places like Svalbard, where that legal gray zone is becoming a playground for larger powers. So while Norway holds the Arctic Council gavel, it's not clear who's actually running the show anymore. And as more countries, Arctic and non-Arctic, start staking claims, this frozen frontier is quickly becoming the world's most unpredictable geopolitical arena. So now that we have seen how Svalbard works and how other powers are quietly moving in, the big question is, can Norway really hold its ground? The pressure is mounting from every direction. Geopolitically, Norway is stuck between loyalty to Western allies like the US and the EU and the reality of sharing the Arctic with Russia, a country that is growing increasingly bold both militarily and diplomatically. Russia knows exactly how far it can stretch the Svalbard Treaty without technically violating it, and by exploiting those gray areas, it's steadily building a stronger presence. Then there is China, which doesn't even share a border with the Arctic yet continues to expand its scientific, economic, and diplomatic influence in the region. A joint research station with Russia and Pyramiden isn't just about science, it's a symbolic foothold. It's a message to the world, we are here too. Environmentally, things are changing fast. The Arctic is warming at nearly 4 times the global average. That's not just melting glaciers, it's melting barriers. Ice once made this region inaccessible, now it's opening up. New shipping lanes mean new trade routes. New trade routes mean new geopolitical value, and new value means new competition. Diplomatically, Norway's hands are tied. As chair of the Arctic Council, it's expected to play nice, to promote cooperation, avoid military posturing, and maintain stability. But that's hard to do when Russia is flying helicopters in restricted areas and building infrastructure in conservation zones. Every time Norway raises a complaint, Russia brushes it off or claims it's within treaty rights. And technically, they are not wrong. This puts Norway in an impossible position. It can't militarize Svalbard without breaking the treaty. It can't block other countries from entering without sparking diplomatic backlash. And it can't compete with the financial and strategic investments being poured in by larger global players. So what options does Norway have? One path is to get tougher diplomatically. Push for stricter interpretation of the Svalbard Treaty, seek stronger enforcement mechanisms, and rally Western allies to back its stance. But that risks escalating tensions and possibly pushing Russia into more aggressive responses. Another path is to quietly reinforce its civilian presence, invest more in Longyearbyen, attract more Norwegian residents, expand infrastructure, and subtly signal to others that this is still Norway's land. But that's a slow game, and it may not be enough to keep pace with Russia and China's strategic moves. And then there is the worst-case scenario. Norway continues to play nice and loses control piece by piece. First, Barentsburg, then Pyramiden, and soon maybe other settlements or research bases that start popping up under the excuse of civilian or scientific missions. From the outside, it might still look like Norway controls Svalbard, but the reality on the ground could become something very different. And this isn't just about one island anymore. Svalbard is the test case. If global powers can bend the rules here, if they can challenge sovereignty without consequences, then what's to stop them from doing the same in other parts of the Arctic, or even other gray zones around the world? We are looking at a future where frozen frontiers turn into front lines, where oil, gas, and strategic positioning matter more than treaties and good intentions, where even neutral countries like Norway are forced to take sides in a game they never signed up for. So, can Norway hold its ground? Maybe, but it'll take more than sovereignty on paper. It will take strategy, alliances, diplomacy, and maybe a willingness to get uncomfortable. Because Svalbard might look like a remote, icy island far from the world's problems, but in reality, this isn't just an Arctic issue anymore. This is a global chessboard.